The Boomers are a faction of former Vault dwellers from Vault 34, east of what was once known as Las Vegas. The name Boomer was coined by outsiders in reference to them due to the explosive ordnance they drop on anyone who gets within a stone's throw of their gates. This may mean they are reclusive, but it doesn't mean they are inherently flawed. Today we'll be taking a deep dive into the Boomers faction, their ideology, government, and why they are by far the most successful smaller faction in all of New Vegas. Let's set the stage a little bit. It's been 200 years since the nuclear bombs devastated the world and brought America to its knees, erasing modern civilization as we know it. The dwellers of Vault 34 survived this onslaught in an experimental vault that had tested its residents by overstocking its armory with firearms and ammunition and not providing a lock, waiting to see what would happen. Ultimately, the vault ended up developing a gun-focused culture. Fearing potential issues arising from the free access of all these firearms, the overseer of the vault locked the armory door, preventing its residents from accessing the weapons they were becoming so fond of. Not satisfied with being denied access to these weapons, the dwellers revolted. Being the Second Amendment absolutists they are, a group of residents demanded access to the armory, citing their right to defend themselves. The overseer denied them this access, which subsequently resulted in a full-blown riot. After the dust settled, the dwellers that had demanded access to the armory vacated the vault in a mass exodus, venturing out into the wasteland. This would be the first time these families were above ground in generations. Two factors became immediately evident after leaving the vault. The first factor being the overabundance of raiders in the Mojave ruins, which put the lives of these dwellers at great risk. The second factor being a lack of suitable shelter to keep the dwellers safe in these harsh ruins. Although they were heavily armed and their tactics were more militant and organized than the raiders, the dwellers were still sustaining an unacceptable amount of casualties in these conflicts. Not one to rest on their laurels, the dwellers decided they must locate a suitable base from which to protect themselves against the raider onslaught. After an undocumented amount of time, they discovered the ruins of an old Air Force base, northeast of Las Vegas, Nellis. It was then they saw it, a brighter future and a new home. Nellis was perfect for them. Plenty of resources, a gated perimeter, and most importantly, shelter from the elements. Upon arriving, they noted that Nellis was radioactive. Having the foresight to pack Geiger counters from the vault before their exodus, they got to work examining the radiation levels in the base. Luckily for them, the radiation was at low enough levels that it allowed for immediate habitation. Not bad for an area that was blasted directly with nuclear warheads. In the base, they found loads of military weapons, equipment, and clothing. They equipped themselves with this new weaponry and incorporated the military hats and jackets in with their old vault suits to create their official uniform. They kept the original vault suit as the base of this uniform so that they will always remember where they came from and why they are here now. This marked the point of the dwellers from Vault 34 transforming into the Boomers we all recognize and love today. When we encounter them in-game, they have evolved into a highly reclusive, near-xenophobic tribe that actively lobs artillery on anyone that gets within sight of their base. While it's a shock that they are so aggressive to outsiders, it's not entirely surprising. The faction as we know it is only a couple of generations removed from the group that vacated Vault 34. In the wastes, they were only encountered by hostile raiders and lost many of their own to these attacks. This led to a common belief amongst the group that all of the people who inhabited the wasteland were savages and should be dealt with on sight. This lasts until Mother Pearl starts noticing things. Lights off in the distance, armies marching around them. She sees that the world is changing and feels that she needs to open the faction up, if only a little, to the outsiders, and decides that she wants an outsider to reach their gates. An outsider who isn't an ignorant savage. An outsider who will help the Boomers, rather than harm them. She issues an order for the first outsider that reaches the gates to be granted an audience with her. This being the player character. Upon reaching Nellis and speaking with Mother Pearl, we are given a quest to help out with a few tasks around Nellis in order to gain favor with the tribe. This is where we really get to learn how successful the Boomers have become in building a society since their days in Vault 34. To begin, the boomers have established an infrastructure that not only allows them independence from establishing relationships with other tribes, but the ability to do so comfortably, which is a rare find in the wasteland. They have established consistent power through the use of solar panels and generators, consistent food and water through farming and irrigation, manufacturing of their own medical supplies such as stim packs, and weapons and ammunition manufacturing to meet all of their big boom needs. Materials that currently don't reside at the base are easily attained through the use of pre-war scavenger bots, such as when they send these bots to dismantle the B-29 bomber in Lake Mead and extradite it to Nellis. They have also developed a cultural philosophy and political leadership that rivals even that of major factions in the Mojave. The philosophy of the boomers is centered around the carry and use of firearms. While not a boomer, I think that Mick from Mick and Ralph's and Freeside says it best when he states,
"A polite society is an armed society."
No one in the Mojave subscribes to this mantra more than the boomers. Every boomer carries a firearm and is more than willing to use it should anyone become a threat to their friends or family. This builds a certain social trust amongst the tribe and responsibility to one another. The politics of the boomer society are equally as simple, with the oldest or most skilled boomer being appointed to the lead position of whichever role they fill. An example would be Mother Pearl, who is the oldest living boomer, or Dr. Argyle, who is the lead physician at Nellis and was appointed this position because he is the tribe's most skilled doctor. It should be noted that this type of political simplicity works well for the boomers due to their small numbers, and would need revision should they reach the size of a larger faction, like Kaisar's Legion or the New California Republic. There are 7 branches of the boomer society that fill in their internal logistical roles, each being headed by an appointed leader, with one exception, and that's in the case of the farmers, but we'll get more into that shortly. The first branch consists of only a single member, the elder. This position acts like a dictator would, being the one who has the final say over all matters. During the events of New Vegas, the current elder is Mother Pearl. She has the power to break the previously set laws to allow outsiders into the base, allow these outsiders to join the Boomers faction, decide to open up trade lines, as well as to assist a certain faction in a major regional conflict, and make changes to the whole societal structure should she see fit. Surely a position of immeasurable power which should not be abused. Next, we have the military, arguably the most important branch to a faction such as the Boomers, and by far the oldest of the branches. The military consists of gate guards who maintain security of the base perimeter, fire teams, should issues occur close enough to the base that launching artillery at it would be detrimental, and an air force that is eagerly awaiting the arrival of the B-29 bomber. At the head of the military is the Master at Arms. During the events of New Vegas, the Master at Arms is a boomer known as Raquel. She has direct control of all military matters that don't involve elder approval, such as conducting raids and training military personnel. Next, we have the Technician branch. This also includes mechanics. This branch is responsible for keeping Nellis up and running. They deal primarily with repairing machines and other items that have broken down, like the solar array, as well as maintaining the Mr. Gutsies that patrol the perimeter, repairing and maintaining the B-29 bomber when it arrives, and even research and development tasks into new weapons and equipment, such as the usage and maintenance of the pre-war flight pod simulators that were found at the base. During the events of New Vegas, we can meet Loyal, who is the current head of this specific branch. Next, we have a highly important role, the farmers. Farmers deal with growing and cultivating crops inside the walls of Nellis. They use fresh water from Lake Mead to grow these crops and ensure that there's enough variety of food to keep the boomers happy and healthy. When talking to the keeper of the story, the player character learns that the boomers purposely grow soy and legumes to add protein into their mostly grain and vegetable diet, decreasing the likelihood of them developing a nutrient deficiency. We also learn that the farmers grow plenty of maize to use in the manufacturing of biodiesel, which allows the boomers to use their diesel generators without having to scavenge from outside of Nellis. Furthermore, every boomer is taught farming from a young age, meaning they will never suffer from a lack of farmers. It's honestly an impressive foresight, if you ask me. Next up are the physicians of Nellis. These physicians are responsible for diagnosing and treating patients, manufacturing and administering medication, and increasing knowledge in medical practices. During the events of New Vegas, this branch is led by Dr. Argyle, who can be found treating a plethora of ant bites. Speaking of increasing knowledge, our next branch is that of the teachers. These boomers instruct the next generation on all things boom, in addition to the basic curriculum that would be found in pre-war schools to set the foundation of knowledge within the future members of their society. It's in the schools that young boomers learn the foundation of firearm use and maintenance, as well as farming. The scores upon graduation will determine what role they fill in society. If they are lucky, they might be chosen for our next branch, the Keeper of the Story. The Keeper of the Story is another branch that only contains a single member, that being the Keeper, obviously. This boomer is responsible for memorizing and reciting the story of how the boomers came into existence, from their time in Vault 34 all the way into their future of flying the bomber. During the events of New Vegas, the Keeper of the Story is a young boomer named Pete. We can learn the majority of the lore and how the boomer's logistical operation works from this young lad. It's unclear as to why he's so young, but it's likely due to having the imagination and oratory skills required to tell this story in an entertaining fashion, a skill that some of the older boomers likely no longer possess. While I must applaud this tribe for their successes, this doesn't mean that life is all sunshine and rainbows for the boomers. While largely independent, they are still dependent on Lake Mead for their fresh water. This becomes immediately apparent when the NCR cut off water to their base. The boomers responded by dropping ordnance on the NCR's water lines. The NCR then promptly turned the boomers' water back on and left them alone. While the boomers won this battle, it's only a matter of time before this weakness gets exploited by another faction that won't be so easily manipulated. The water situation isn't the only non-ideal situation they find themselves in. When we arrive in Nellis, they are swimming in inconveniences. Some ants have just burrowed their way down into the generator room and began eating the gunpowder stored there. Not only does this affect their gunpowder supply, but not being able to get into the generator room has left several sections of their base unpowered. Raquel, Master-at-Arms of Nellis, led a fire team down into the array to deal with the ants, but received an explosive surprise when they attacked with lasers and fire. This raid resulted in the deaths of 2 boomers, and many more injured from ant bites. Not only this, but a few solar panels on top of the array are damaged, preventing the boomers from collecting an ideal amount of power during the day. Raquel needs more missiles to offset their dwindling supply, the doctors need help giving medical attention to ant bite victims, and the worst tragedy of all, the baby boomer Lindsay has lost her teddy bear. Press F to mourn. While this may all sound tragic, and it may appear as if the boomers don't have their stuff together, this assessment is dead wrong. It just so happens that these events are occurring right as we are introduced to them. We are tasked with solving these problems to prove our worth to the boomers, not because they themselves are incapable of doing so, much like the NCR with most of their problems. It's likely that they will have solved their issues within a matter of days, or at most weeks, as Raquel is already formulating a counterattack plan with the Technician Corps. Loyal can totally repair the solar array anytime, he just hasn't yet since the ant problem hasn't been dealt with, and Argyle is actively treating his patients as we arrive. The biggest problem they face is the dwindling missile supplies. I say this with exasperation as they still have 5 years of supply left even after all they burned through blowing up ignorant savages. That said, several of the post-game endings involve them opening up trade with outsiders such as the Gunrunners, which instantly resolves this issue. Although they are a bit archaic when we encounter them, their leadership is solid, logistics top-notch, and the level of self-sufficiency they have achieved in such a short amount of time is beyond impressive. This is why, in my opinion, the Boomers are the most successful smaller faction in all of New Vegas. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. If you like this content, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Your support means more to me than you will ever know. I release new Fallout lore videos every other week, so there will be plenty of content for you in the future. Thank you again, and until we meet next, Vale, Amicus.